The river wants to kill you. Not dramatically, not with fangs or claws or anything you can fight back against. It wants to kill you the way bureaucracy kills you, slowly, through 1,000 small misunderstandings that accumulate into a single catastrophic outcome. A sandbar that wasn't there yesterday. A current that looks calm on the surface and runs like a freight train 6 inches down. A channel that narrows without warning into a hydraulic trap that will hold a boat or a person underwater until there's nothing left to hold. The Mississippi River killed steamboats at a rate that would make a modern aviation safety board weep. Between 1811 and the Civil War, more than 500 steamboat disasters occurred on the river. Explosions, fires, collisions, and groundings. The groundings were the most common, and almost every grounding happened because someone on board couldn't read the water. The pilots who could read it became legends, not because they had better boats, not because they had better charts. The charts were notoriously unreliable. The river changed faster than anyone could map it. They became legends because they learned to extract information from the surface of the water itself. Color, texture, ripple pattern, eddy behavior, floating debris, the sound the hull made in different conditions. All of it was data. All of it was a language. And the pilots who learned that language moved through the most dangerous river system in North America with a confidence that looked, to outside observers, like supernatural intuition. It wasn't intuition. It was literacy. On the other side of the planet, Polynesian navigators were doing something even more remarkable. They were crossing thousands of miles of open Pacific Ocean in outrigger canoes with no compass, no sextant, no charts, no GPS, and arriving at specific islands, sometimes only a few miles wide, with an accuracy that modern researchers using instrument navigation struggle to replicate. They navigated using star paths, yes, but the stars only work in clear skies. For the days and weeks when clouds obscured the stars, they used something else. They read the ocean itself, swell patterns, watercolor changes, temperature gradients, the behavior of bioluminescent plankton, current boundaries visible as lines on the water surface, and they navigated by it with the same confidence a modern pilot navigates by instrument. We lost this, not because it stopped working, because we built instruments and decided the instruments were enough. In a world where the instruments are gone, GPS dead, charts unavailable, technology reduced to whatever you can carry in your hands, the water will still be talking. It never stopped. The question is whether you can hear it. Today, you start learning the language. Before we get into specific reading techniques, you need to understand the fundamental principle that makes all of this possible. Water is a fluid that responds to and records everything that acts on it. Every force, every obstacle, every change in depth or current speed or bottom composition leaves a visible signature on the surface. Water cannot lie. It can only respond to physics, and physics is consistent and readable. This is the operating principle that river pilots, coastal navigators, and ocean wayfinders all independently arrived at. The surface of water is not scenery. It is a continuous display of information about what is happening below it, around it, upstream of it, and in the atmosphere above it. Every ripple is a sentence. Every color change is a paragraph. The skill is not generating the information. The water generates it automatically. The skill is knowing how to read it. The second principle is that water reading is a layered skill. At the most basic level, you can learn enough in an hour to significantly improve your safety on any body of water. At the intermediate level, which takes weeks of deliberate observation, you can navigate rivers and coastal waters with reliable confidence. At the advanced level, the level of the Mississippi pilots and the Polynesian wayfinders, the water becomes a complete navigational environment that provides everything you need to know about where you are and what's ahead. We're going to move through all three levels today, starting with the information that could save your life tomorrow and building toward the deeper literacy that takes time but that no one is teaching. Start with color, because color is the first thing you can read from a distance, and it carries the most information per observation. Brown water in a river context is not automatically a danger signal. Most large rivers run brown from suspended sediment. But the shade and distribution of brown matters enormously. Uniform brown across the entire channel means the sediment load is consistent, which means the depth is probably consistent with recent conditions. A sudden localized darkening of the water, a patch that's noticeably darker brown than the surrounding channel, often indicates a deeper hole. The darkness comes from the increased depth absorbing more light. Pilots call these dark patches blue holes in some regional traditions, and they seek them out because deep water is safe water. The opposite is critical. Pale, milky, or yellowish-brown water in an otherwise darker channel indicates shallow water. The bottom is close enough to the surface that light is reflecting off the sediment on the riverbed and lightening the water color from below. You are looking at a potential grounding hazard. The paler the water, the shallower the bottom. In extreme cases, the white or cream-colored water that experienced pilots called whitewater in the non-whitewater rapids sense, the bottom may be inches from the surface. Green water in a river tells you something different. True green coloration, not brown-green turbidity, but clear green, indicates depth and low sediment load. This is the clearest, deepest water in the channel. In the Mississippi context, the pilots knew that the greenest water was the navigation channel, the deepest, fastest, most recently scoured path the river had cut through its own sediment. Follow the green and you follow the safe path. Abandon it and you're gambling on conditions you can't see. Now, texture. The surface texture of moving water is a real-time depth and bottom composition map that most people look at without seeing. Smooth, glassy water moving quickly is deep water over a smooth bottom. The laminar flow, water moving in parallel layers without significant turbulence, produces a glassy surface. This is the water the steamboat pilots wanted. This is the water you want. The faster it moves while remaining glassy, the deeper and cleaner the channel. Choppy, disturbed surface water with irregular small waves and boils means the water is shallow enough that the bottom is creating turbulence. The turbulence rises to the surface and disrupts the smooth flow. You are looking at the top layer of a water column that is rubbing against the bottom. This is the precursor to grounding. Rippling water that runs in consistent, ordered parallel lines perpendicular to the current direction, washboard ripples, indicates a consistent bottom feature at uniform depth. This can be a gravel bar just below the surface. Gravel bars are common grounding hazards that don't announce themselves with dramatic turbulence. They look almost benign. They are not. The standing wave is one of the most important surface features to recognize. A standing wave, a wave that appears to stay in one place while the water runs under it, is created when fast-moving water hits an obstruction or a sudden change in bottom depth. The wave stands because the hydraulic conditions creating it are fixed. What's creating it is still there. It might be a submerged rock. It might be the transition from deep to shallow. It might be a partially submerged log. In any case, the standing wave is pointing at something solid below the surface. Do not run a standing wave you haven't read. Eddies, the circular backflow areas that form downstream of obstructions, are both navigational information and practical tools. The eddy tells you there's an obstruction immediately upstream. The size of the eddy gives you a rough sense of the size of the obstruction creating it. A small eddy behind a rock means a small rock. A large, well-developed eddy with a clearly defined eddy line, the boundary between downstream current and upstream eddy flow, means a large obstruction. The eddy line itself is a current boundary and can be a capsizing hazard for small craft. It's a zone where current is running in opposite directions within inches of each other. But eddies are also refuge. In any emergency on moving water, a swimmer in current, a paddler who has lost control, The eddy is the safe haven. It is the calm spot that the river has placed, for free, downstream of every obstruction. Swim for the eddy. Float into the eddy. The eddy will hold you while you recover and plan. Now, debris. What's floating on the water tells you what's happening upstream, and upstream is where your near future is coming from. Floating vegetation, leaves, grass, plant material that has been uprooted, indicates recent bank erosion upstream. The bank is giving way to the current. This means the channel is actively shifting in that area, which means the bottom configuration you're navigating today may not match any chart drawn last month. It also means the current near the eroding bank is actively undercutting, powerful enough to tear vegetation from the bank. Do not approach that bank in a small craft. Foam lines on the surface of a river, long streaks of white foam that run parallel to the current, are current convergence lines. They form where two current threads meet and the surface water has nowhere to go but down, which brings anything floating on the surface together in a line. These foam lines are navigation information. They mark the seams between current patterns, and they often trace the deepest, fastest water in the channel. The Mississippi pilots knew to run the foam line in ambiguous channel sections. The foam didn't lie about where the current was. Floating wood, particularly submerged wood visible just below the surface, is one of the most serious hazards in river navigation and one of the most readable. A barely submerged log moving with the current is nearly invisible from a distance, but it creates a subtle surface disruption, a slight hump in the water surface directly above it where the current is pushed upward by the obstruction, and a small trailing V pattern downstream. The V is the key. Any V shape on the water surface with the apex pointing upstream is telling you that something solid is creating that pattern. It may be a rock. It may be a log. It may be a bridge pylon. The V always points back at its cause. The inverse is also true and equally important. A V shape with the apex pointing downstream, the opening of the V facing you, is a downstream V, and it tells the opposite story. A downstream V is a gap between two obstructions where the current is accelerating through an opening. It is not pointing at an obstacle. It is pointing at a passage. In whitewater navigation, this is called reading the tongue. The smooth, downstream pointing V of clean current between two hazards is the line you take. The upstream pointing V is the hazard. The downstream pointing V is the route. Learn this distinction. It is the most immediately applicable piece of river literacy in this entire video. Upstream V, obstruction. Downstream V, passage. Every river you will ever navigate is covered with these two shapes, and they are telling you exactly where to go and where not to go, continuously, for free, as long as the water is moving. The Mississippi pilots didn't only use their eyes. The best of them navigated partially by sound, specifically the sound the hull made in different water conditions, and by feel through the behavior of the vessel itself. You may not have a hull, but you have a paddle, a stick, a pole, or your own body in the water. Each of these things talks to you about what's below the surface if you know how to listen. In shallow water, a paddle blade feels different than in deep water. The resistance changes. In very shallow water, the blade catches eddies off the bottom on each stroke, a stuttering, irregular resistance that tells your hands what your eyes might have missed. A wading person feels the bottom composition change under their feet. The shift from soft mud to packed sand to gravel to rock tells them about the bottom they're crossing and the current behavior they can expect. Sound changes everything. In a river, the sound of moving water tells you what it's doing. A smooth, low hiss is deep, fast laminar flow. A higher-pitched chuckling or splashing is shallow water over a broken bottom. A deep, resonant roaring from around a bend is either a significant drop or a major hydraulic feature. The absence of sound in a section of river that was previously audible is also information. You may be entering a deep, slow pool. Pools are often safe. They are also often where river hazards accumulate: strainers, log jams, the bases of pour-overs. The sound of gravel moving under current is one of the more distinctive sounds in river navigation and one of the most useful. In shallow, fast water running over a gravel bed, you can hear the gravel moving, a grinding, rolling percussion that is audible from the bank or from a boat in the right conditions. This sound means the bottom is mobile. Mobile bottoms are unpredictable bottoms. The channel that was 3 feet deep yesterday may have shifted overnight. Coastal navigation by water reading operates on the same principle as river reading, but applied to salt water over a different bottom composition spectrum, and with the added dimension of open ocean swell behavior that has no equivalent in river navigation. The most critical coastal reading skill is depth estimation by color. Deep, open ocean water is blue. Not the pale blue of a swimming pool, a deep, saturated indigo blue that comes from the ocean absorbing all wavelengths of light except blue at depth. When you see this color, you are in deep water, safe water for any reasonable vessel. As the bottom rises, the color changes. Deep blue transitions to lighter blue, then to green, then to turquoise, then to pale turquoise or aquamarine, then, in the shallowest water over light sand, to near white. This color gradient is a continuous depth gauge that experienced coastal navigators read automatically. The traditional Pacific navigators knew this color spectrum so precisely that they could estimate depth to within a few feet by watercolor alone in clear conditions. Brown or reddish-brown patches in coastal water indicate reef, coral, or rock close to the surface. Dark patches in otherwise lighter coastal water are either deep holes or reef. The distinction matters. A dark patch that appears suddenly in pale water is reef until proven otherwise. Give it distance. White water, not foam, but genuinely white agitated water in a coastal context is the most urgent warning the ocean can give you. This is breaking water. The seafloor is within 1 wave height of the surface, and the waves are breaking on it. This is where ships die. This is where swimmers drown. White water in coastal navigation means turn now, turn hard, and put distance between you and that white water before you think about anything else. Rip currents are one of the most deadly coastal features and one of the most readable once you know what to look for. A rip current is a concentrated, fast-moving channel of water flowing seaward through the surf zone, the drainage system the ocean uses to move the water that waves push onto shore back out to sea. It does not pull you under, it carries you offshore. In a strong rip, it carries you offshore faster than most people can swim. Thousands of people drown in rip currents every year, almost entirely because they didn't see it before they were in it, and didn't know what to do when they were. Here is how you read a rip current from the beach before you enter the water. Look for a channel of darker, calmer water running perpendicular to shore through the surf zone. The rip is calmer because it's deep. The returning water has scoured a channel through the sand. On either side of the rip, waves are breaking white and visible. Inside the rip channel, the water is darker and the surface is choppy from the current, but not breaking white. The foam and floating debris on the surface inside the rip channel drifts seaward, while everything around it drifts toward shore. That seaward drifting foam line is the rip marking itself for you. A discolored, murky streak of water extending from shore seaward, often brownish or greenish against the blue of deeper water, is another rip indicator. The rip is carrying sediment from the shallow beach zone out to deeper water. You can see the sediment plume from a distance. It is the rip advertising itself. If you enter a rip current, deliberately for exit from a shore situation, or accidentally, the survival protocol runs counter to every instinct. Do not swim against it. You will exhaust yourself and make no progress. A rip current typically runs 1 to 2 miles per hour. Some run faster. You cannot outswim it. What you can do is swim perpendicular to it, across the current, parallel to the shore, which takes you out of the rip channel. The rip is narrow. You are not trying to fight the ocean. You are trying to step sideways out of the drain. Now we go to the deep end of the skill set. This is where water reading becomes something close to a different kind of consciousness, a perceptual system so developed that its practitioners could sense the position of land they could not see, could not smell, could not hear, and could not detect by any means a modern person would recognize. The Polynesian navigation system, built on ocean swell reading, is one of the most remarkable intellectual achievements in human history, and it has been almost entirely lost. What remains was reconstructed partly through the work of researchers who found the last few practitioners in the 1970s and documented what they knew before it disappeared entirely. The foundation is this: the deep ocean is always moving. Even in the absence of local wind, swells generated by storms thousands of miles away are running through the water constantly. These swells have consistent direction, consistent period, and consistent behavior. They run until they hit something, and when they hit something, they reflect, refract, and diffract around it. Land masses, even small islands, disturb swell patterns at distances of up to 30 miles, well beyond visual range, well beyond smell range, well beyond the range of any sense except the one the Polynesian navigators developed: the ability to feel swell pattern disturbance through the hull of a canoe with their bodies. The practitioners who were documented in the 1970s described lying on the floor of the canoe to feel swell patterns with their bodies directly, the torso acting as a more sensitive receiver than the hands or feet. They felt the primary swell running under them, and they felt the secondary swells, the reflections and refractions from land, crossing the primary at specific angles. The angle and character of the crossing swell told them where the land was relative to their position, even when the land was far beyond the horizon. This is not mysticism. This is physics. The swell disturbance patterns are real and consistent. Modern researchers have mapped them using buoy networks and confirmed that the patterns the Polynesian navigators described are physically present in the water. The navigators were reading a real signal. They had developed the sensitivity to feel it. You are unlikely to develop this level of swell sensitivity without years of dedicated practice on the water. But the principle informs a suite of more accessible swell reading skills that are practically valuable in any coastal or open water scenario. The direction a swell is running tells you where the storm that generated it was. Consistent, long-period swells, big, slow rollers with significant distance between crests, have traveled a long way from a large storm. Short-period, choppy swells are locally generated. This distinction tells you about the weather both near you and at a distance. Confused swell, multiple swell trains running from different directions crossing each other, indicates that multiple weather systems are active in different parts of the ocean. It also makes for uncomfortable and potentially dangerous small craft conditions, because the crossing swells produce unpredictable wave heights where they constructively interfere. A sudden increase in swell height with no local wind change means a significant storm is approaching from the direction the swell is coming from. The swell outruns the storm. It arrives first. It is the storm's announcement. Polynesian navigators read this as departure weather information. If the swells from a certain direction were building, the conditions in that direction were deteriorating, and you did not sail that direction. The behavior of swell as it approaches land changes in specific, readable ways. Swells slow down as they enter shallow water. The bottom friction decelerates them. As they slow, their wavelength compresses and their height increases. This is why waves are bigger near shore than offshore. The transition from deep water swell to shallow water wave is readable from the surface as a change in the character of the water. The smooth, long, rounded swells of deep water becoming steeper, more peaked, more closely spaced as they approach bottom. When you see swells changing character in this way in water that should be deep, that should be too far from shore for bottom effects, there is bottom closer than expected. There is something below you that shouldn't be there. This is one of the earliest warnings of a shoal in open coastal water. The swells are feeling the bottom before you can see it or chart it. The open ocean has invisible highways, rivers of water moving through the larger ocean with their own temperatures, colors, and biological communities. These current boundaries are readable and navigable, and were used by both Pacific navigators and Atlantic coastal pilots long before oceanography named and mapped them. Water color changes sharply at current boundaries. The Gulf Stream, running northward along the American East Coast, is a vivid indigo blue that contrasts sharply with the green-gray water of the continental shelf. The boundary is visible from a small boat as a clear color transition. Blue water on one side, green water on the other. The pilots and navigators who worked the East Coast knew this line well. Blue side, fast-moving deep warm water running northward, useful for passage making north, counterproductive for passage making south. Green side, shallower, cooler, slower coastal water. Temperature differences between water masses are feelable by hand. A significant current boundary can involve temperature differences of 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit over a horizontal distance of a few hundred feet. Put your hand in the water on one side of the boundary. Pull it out. Cross the boundary. Put it back in. The difference is unmistakable. Traditional navigators used this constantly to track current systems they couldn't see but could feel. Bioluminescence, the cold, blue-green glow produced by certain plankton species when disturbed, is a navigation tool that most modern people only experience as an aesthetic wonder. The Polynesian navigators used it operationally. Bioluminescent plankton communities concentrate at current boundaries, upwelling zones, and areas of biological productivity. The distribution of bioluminescence at night marks the same oceanographic features that color and temperature mark during the day. Paddling through bioluminescent water and watching its distribution, where it concentrates, where it disappears, told the navigators about the current structure of the water they were moving through. Moving from bioluminescent to dark water, or vice versa, was crossing a current boundary. The navigators tracked these boundaries at night the way a river pilot tracks color boundaries by day. Now the complete rapid assessment protocol, because in a real scenario, you need a sequence you can execute under pressure, not a catalog of observations you have to mentally sort through while the current is making decisions for you. You're on the water. Something is wrong with your electronics. Your GPS is dead. Your chart is missing, wet, or 3 years out of date. You need to navigate using what the water is telling you directly. First, read color before anything else. From whatever height you can achieve, stand in the boat, climb a bank, find elevation, read the color pattern of the water ahead. Dark means deep. Pale means shallow. Green means clean channel. Brown over light means bottom close. White means breaking. Avoid. Second, read surface texture. Glassy and fast means deep and safe. Choppy and irregular means shallow and turbulent. Rippled and parallel lines means uniform bottom feature, likely a bar. Find the glassy water and stay in it. Third, find the V patterns. Upstream pointing V is obstruction, go around. Downstream pointing V is passage, go through. Every significant obstruction in moving water is wearing a V. Find the downstream Vs and run them. Fourth, read the debris and foam. Foam lines trace the current seams and mark the deep water. Floating vegetation tells you about upstream bank conditions. Debris concentration areas tell you about current convergence, useful information and potentially a strainer hazard in a river context. Fifth, use sound and feel. What does the water sound like? What does the paddle or pole feel like? Is the resistance clean or stuttering? Is gravel moving under you? Is the hull sound changing? Sixth, watch what the water does when it hits things. Every obstruction, visible or submerged, is creating surface effects downstream of it. Read those effects backward to understand the obstruction. Eddy means obstacle. Standing wave means obstacle. Surface boil means rising current from depth, means deep water nearby. Seventh, in open coastal water. Read swell behavior. Are the swells changing character, steepening, compressing, becoming more peaked in water that should be deep? Bottom is coming up. Are swells running confused and crossed? Multiple weather systems. Is swell height building with no local wind? Storm approaching from swell direction. Assemble these readings simultaneously and you have a picture of the water in front of you that is more reliable and more current than any chart produced at any point in the past. The chart is a snapshot. The water surface is live data. Mark Twain worked as a Mississippi River pilot before he was a writer. Life on the Mississippi, his memoir of that period, contains what is arguably the most beautiful description of water literacy ever written. He describes learning to read the river, and then describes the moment he realized that learning to read it had changed how he saw it, had taken the aesthetic wonder of the surface and replaced it with pure information. He mourned that a little. The beauty was still there, but he could no longer see it without simultaneously reading it. That is the price of literacy. You stop seeing the surface as scenery. You start seeing it as text. The river pilots who kept the Mississippi commerce alive before the Civil War, the Polynesian navigators who settled every habitable island in the Pacific, the coastal pilots who moved goods along every major waterway in the pre-instrument world, they all paid that price. They all stopped seeing water as a backdrop and started seeing it as a language. That language is still being spoken. Every river, every coastline, every stretch of open ocean is generating the same surface information it generated when the pilots and navigators were reading it. The V patterns are still there. The color gradients are still there. The swell disturbances are still radiating outward from every island in the Pacific. The instruments failed. The GPS went down. The chart is useless. But the water is still talking. You know how to listen now. Read it.